What is happening, people? Welcome back to the Scarfey Spurs Talk Podcast. We're going to be reviewing that Nottingham Forest defeat. There's lots of questions surrounding Thomas Frank's future, the direction of this team, some going as far as saying that we could easily slip into becoming a mid-table side without an identity if we haven't already, but should be a good one. Of course, it's never nice to discuss a defeat. It's almost like a little bit of a therapy session, but it allows us to get a lot off our chest. So let's introduce the panel one by one. Firstly, Dustin joining us from Singapore. Dustin, how are you doing?
All right, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for your time, and apologies about the circumstances.
No worries.
Still a good one. Thank you for your time. Philip joining us from Frankfurt, Germany. Philip, how are you doing?
Yeah, under the circumstances, all right, I guess. I've got a bit of a nasty. I've just got back from 4 days in London, actually, and I've just picked up a bit of a nasty cold or flu, I think, probably from the thousands of people, doing Christmas shopping and stuff, right, on the tubes, and the stress of Spurs. So I'm currently just navigating my way through that and trying to be positive about Spurs. So.
Well, thank you for your time. It's fair to say there's a lot of flu cases at the moment, around England, and it's a time of year, I think, as well. But Spurs does not make it any easier, let's say. But thank you, Philip, for your time. And Justin, like myself, joining us from England. How you doing, Justin?
Yeah, not too bad. It's good to see that I'm back on when Spurs lose. I've noticed that always seems to fit in. I mean, to be fair, if it's easy just to have me banned from the channel, I can stick to the loan roundups and we win the Premier League. It seems like that'd be the easiest way. But no, thank you for having us on, regardless of the circumstances.
I know there's a couple of people waiting to bring on when the games are bad. But I promise you, Justin was agreed to come on before the game, but you can blame me for that rather than Justin. But thank you all for your time tonight. Like I said, it should be a good one. There's a lot to get off our chest. I mean, I'm sure you're all ready to say a lot of things. But before we do, just want to say, if you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe if you're new. If you like this in particular bit of content, do drop a like. If you're listening live as well, get involved. We'll bring up your comments through, read out your comments because we do appreciate you all. But just because you've listened after doesn't mean you still can't get involved. Get in touch. You can email me, scarfharry323@gmail.com, or get in touch with me at harryscarfe22 because we will interact and bring up any future questions as well that you do have. If you're listening via audio or podcast platform, drop us a follow and a 5-star review. Now let's talk Tottenham. I want to start with the lineup before the game. We're going to go through it chronologically. So the lineup beforehand: Vicario in goal, a backline of Spence, Van der Ven, Romero, Porro, a midfield of Gray, Bentancur, Simmons, and a front line of Moani, Richarlison, and Kudus. Justin, would it be fair to say that team was fairly expected? No big surprise in there?
No, not really at all. I think, when you look at how we have played over the last couple of games, Gray has played well. He seems to have linked up well, whether it be with Bentancur, whether it be with Paulinho. It seems to be a more steady ship that we've had in there. It's not been as defensive as when it's been Bentancur or Paulinho, and it's not been too open when he's gone with Sarr and Bergvall. So I'll be honest, I sort of looked at it and thought maybe you could argue about, Moani on the left, could he be playing up top? But Richarlison is sadly our top scorer. So, I looked at that and I thought, well, to be fair, considering the fact we've had an extra day off from Forest, I thought that was probably the most competitive lineup that we could have had, really. There wasn't any sort of obvious things that I would have dramatically changed. I looked at it and I thought, because you would have seen that Moani and Richarlison would have probably either linked up at times. There was, to me, I looked at it, I thought there was a lot of potential for movement. You look at Simmons, could he have stepped into left and Moani then moves in? Could Richarlison have gone out wide and and then Simmons moved? There was a lot of parts that you thought there was a lot of options that would have had a lot more creativity than obviously what was delivered. So no, I looked at that lineup and I thought I fancied us. I actually did fancy us because I looked at the performances of the last couple of games and I thought, yeah, this should be, in my eyes, I thought a comfortable victory, but how wrong was I?
Not the only one, that's for sure. Justin, I can share that with you. Thank you. Philip, when the lineup come out, were you like Justin and still, fancy Tottenham's chance in this game? Because, like I said to him, there wasn't really any big surprise in there, really. It's what we've seen in the last couple of games, really.
I was really happy before the game. Like when the lineup came out, I was actually more than happy. I was delighted. I thought Frank stuck with Archie obviously in midfield. He's obviously put Moani on the left probably and Richarlison up front, which at the end of the day where we are at the moment I was also fine with and quite happy with because they played quite well there recently as well. Defense obviously kind of picks itself at the moment with Udogie being injured. And I was also happy not to see Palhinha start, to be honest, because I don't want to, I don't think that Palhinha offers us enough in games theoretically like yesterday should have been for us. So I was actually quite happy to see him start how he did, and then I was really positive. Like Justin, I think I predicted like a 3-1 win or something anyways yesterday because I thought that we finally got some green shoots of recovery, right, with the Brentford game and then the Champions League game against Slavia Prague, and I thought we're just gonna keep on that trajectory. We're gonna actually come out all guns firing because I think it was two extra rest days in the end, wasn't it? Possibly than Forest. So we had two extra days. And weren't Forest even away in Europe, possibly in Utrecht? I'm not. I can't.
They played in Netherlands.
They were away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they went all the way out to Netherlands on Thursday night, got back probably at like 2 a.m. on Friday, and then, do you know what I mean? Turn up like that yesterday. We had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we turn up like that. But we'll get into it, obviously. But, in terms of the lineup, in terms of at least what Frank probably picked and wanted us to do, let's say, in terms of the people, I was really happy because he stuck to, especially Gray. I wanted him to play Gray, mainly. I didn't want to see him kind of leave the team.
No, I feel the same as you. Yeah, definitely. And it's easy to say now, isn't it? Look back and go, that was wrong, or I would have done this. But the reality is, I think we're all fairly at least content, if not more than that, at the time. Dustin, we saw, of course, Moani and Richarlison in the lineup again. I mean, when you saw it, who were you thinking was going to play on that left and up front? Did you think it would be what it was in the end with Moani at left wing and Richarlison up top, which has happened now a couple of times already?
I think it's clear that Frank likes what Richarlison offers him down the centre, regardless of how anyone else feels. So, personally, I feel that Moani would be a better player to play down the middle, just because it means that he can play off Xavi. He is better at playing 1-2 passes. He's better at making runs, offering himself for the ball. He has a better first touch. The ball doesn't bounce off him 10 yards or so whenever he receives it. So I think that for me, persisting with Richarlison down the center is, you can say that he has been our top scorer so far, but we haven't really been playing very fluid football. It's been very much I wasn't that positive before the game, even after the Brentford and Slavia Prague results, just because Frank is a manager that is a reactive manager. He researches his teams very much, so he would know his own team best of all previously. So I expected him to do well against Brentford because he knew them inside out. Slavia Prague are not the best side in the world. I think that they weren't as bad as Copenhagen, but it feels like they would be one of the weakest teams that we will play in the Champions League. So I took the results away from how I felt about it, and I just looked at how we played, and it was just playing against poorer opposition. So I was happy with the result, but I didn't see anything particularly in those games that made me feel like we would necessarily be able to do that against a Premier League side, even one that's in the bottom half of the league.
Yeah, fair enough. No, okay, you make some good points. I do appreciate that. Let's move on then to the action. We discuss all the goals and then get the post-match kind of feeling and thoughts amongst you guys and also the people listening. Philip, I'll come back to you. First goal then, 28th minute, was scored by Callum Hudson-Odoi. I hate the blame game, but I think there has to be a question asked when you concede a goal like this. Where does the blame lie for you? Because I really like Archie Gray, right? I'm going to put this as simple as I can. I like him. I do think he's the one at fault here. I think, of course, Vicario, why you pass in that situation, but this is nothing new. And Gray, at the same time as a player, he wants the ball. Gray's, if you look at it back, Gray's asking for the ball. Has he got to take his fair share of responsibility for that goal?
Yeah, I think so. When it happened, I was blaming Vicario a bit more, I think, in the heat of the moment. Because I was just like, why are you putting Gray in that situation, regardless of whether Gray's calling for it or not? There was a lot of players around. Again, just kick it long, like play it long. Or I think he could have even played it out wide. To be fair, because Gray, yeah, there you go. Like Gray, anyways, had to just kind of like pass it straight over to Porro. I think really was the immediate pass right over there. But after kind of looking at the replay and digesting it, I think Gray is more at fault. But it's a bit of a catalogue of errors, isn't it, really? I mean, Archie probably, I don't know, in that moment, you don't really know why he's taking the extra touches, do you? I can only assume he didn't realise that there was that player right on him. Or he didn't see him, or I don't know what, because all he has to do is play it first time. But, it's a learning. If I'm looking at it like, again, somehow positively, right? We've made a lot of mistakes, playing the ball out from the back over the last couple of years. And, Gray can only learn from these things, right? To be honest with you. But then I would also say the good thing is that Gray was actually coming back from midfield to actually show for the ball, which is something that we've been missing for most of the season. We haven't had midfielders who will come super deep to maybe take the ball and then obviously turn and then pass it. So it's a bit of a shame because he could have just done it so tidily and he didn't. And then unfortunately it just kind of fits to our whole kind of situation at the moment, doesn't it? It's just a standard typical soft kind of present of a gift wrap present of a goal, right, for Forest out of nothing, which is so annoying because we just keep giving away these stupid goals, which Forest don't even have to work for. And actually, if you look at the replay just quickly on that, Gray, he might kind of kick himself a bit as well, because when he, after giving away the ball, he kind of hesitates for a moment. And if he had actually run back towards the goal, then I think he would have actually possibly got the deflection afterwards. If you look at the replay, he kind of he stops and then he runs. And if he goes straight to the goal, then he probably saves that as well. So, it's just one of those things, unfortunately. But there is probably a question mark as well about, again, how is Vicario distributing the ball out? Do we have a plan of distributing it out, or is it just a case again of the players, acting inconsistently? Yeah, I don't want to talk about Vicario now and put him under the microscope again, but we'll probably do that again later on anyway with a second goal maybe.
Yeah, we will discuss Vicario at some point. There's a couple of players I think need discussing, and he's one of them. Go on, Dustin. I think you want to add something.
Yeah, I watched the game back just before this to take these screenshots and everything. And one thing I did notice was that Vicario played the same ball to Bentancur about 3 or 4 times, and Bentancur didn't have a problem. That said, Bentancur plays in Uruguay under Marcelo Bielsa, so playing out from the back is something that they would train a lot in the national team. And it feels to me that this is something that we played this kind of ball for the last 2 years under Ange. So I think part of it is kind of we don't practice that anymore. So the movement that we have off the ball to support people making deep runs to receive isn't there. So if you show for the ball like that, Bentancur probably has a lot more experience. He knows I don't have time to take a touch, right? I've got to do one touch to someone. That's the safer thing to do, and he does that well. In fact, I thought Bentancur had one of his better games in this game. Gray, on the other hand, is a much younger player. He is still a teenager. He takes that heavy touch, but I think part of it also is it's the centre backs and the left back and right back. They should be showing for the ball and being a clearer option as well. So it feels to me that it's a pattern of play that is unrehearsed, and it's something where a player shows for the ball, but it's not an automation. It's not, instinctive because it's probably not drilled or trained as much as it used to be.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dustin. Appreciate that. And before we move on from this first goal, Justin, can I get your thoughts on it? And also want to get your thoughts on what Frank said after the game, because, just pick out a small part. Frank said that he felt the game was in the balance before Forest scored the first goal. But if you look at the highlights, you look at the stats, you watch the game, everything, suggests that is not the case.
I think he's probably more looking on the basis it's 0-0. They hadn't taken a lead at that point. Were we getting into the game? Who knows? So, from that perspective, you can sit there and think, well, maybe he's looking at it from that basis more than anything else. I slightly disagree on who's to blame for the goal. I think that, to be fair, both Vicario and Gray. I think actually more Vicario, because in effect, if you look at, as we said, leading up to the goal itself, and obviously then what happened, and then the aftermath, Gray is putting himself out there. He's turning around, and okay, he's a young player, and he's having to come from quite a way back to request the ball. Was it the smartest choice? Probably not. But Vicario can see in front of him. He can see the whole picture. He can see, right, this player is coming towards Gray. This is what is around me. Is this the safest option? And obviously, okay, Gray did then fumble it, and obviously they then score from it. But the other part I didn't like was the whole, where Vicario is then just blaming, Gray and what have you. And I'm sitting there to myself and thinking, okay, but he may have asked to be put in that position, but you still put him in that position. You can see what is in front of you. You have, in effect, you've given him the rope to hang himself, ultimately. And as somebody who, let's face facts, it's not like he's a young, up-and-coming goalkeeper now. We've had him for what? This is now his third year at Tottenham. We went for him as a cheaper alternative to David Raya. So, he is now a senior pro in terms of that. And it should be things like that. And I know we're going to get into the second goal and things like that, where he has to take that responsibility. I think that's what kind of frustrates Spurs fans. He's very quick to blame everybody else bar himself. And yes, I do think Gray has to be held accountable, but I do also think Vicario is, as Gray is a much younger player. He's still learning, but he's showing the energy and he's wanting the ball. I think too many times we have players that shy away and do not want the ball. So, we tend to say that, we will allow these players to make mistakes. And that's all it was. It was just a mistake by a player who was showing positivity, showing hunger, wanting the ball. We don't really want to be battering him against it, when actually, yes, there were other mitigating factors within it, but we want him to keep doing that because the goalkeeper is going to keep playing out the ball. And as I can't remember who said it, Bentancur was comfortable with it. Well, surely at some point we've got to keep showing Gray the ball so that he can get that comfortable with it. So it's disappointing, but ultimately, yes, we were, in terms of from the score point of view, we were still in the game. But when you watch the game fully on from that point, it very much tells a very different story.
Agree with you on that. Thank you very much. And then the second goal come in the second half. It was 1-0 at half time. It came in the 50th minute, and Callum Hudson-Odoi, who completed his brace. Dustin, I'll come back to you. I mean, for this goal, does the blame lie with Vicario? I mean, of course, you've got to give credit to Forest and Hudson-Odoi in particular for the shot, but it should really, I think, not be going in from there. Would you agree?
Yeah, it looks very much like Kane's mask goal against Arsenal, given the angle that it's from. But I would say that Vicario's positioning was not good for that goal, because as it looped over him, you could see that it didn't go into the corner of the goal. It passes him kind of like maybe about 60% from the center. So it's not a top bins kind of goal, right? And he should be positioning himself better for that. I will say that he did save a lot of shots before that. So I think the thing about goalkeepers is that for most goalkeepers, they save a good goalkeeper saves about 75% of the shots that he faces. So in some cases, there are teams that concede lots of shots, and the goalkeeper, he looks bad because he concedes a lot of goals, but actually he's saving as many goals as he can. So there was once a goalkeeper that was with Fulham that let in tons of goals, but he was saving 75% of his shots and was later signed by Man United. There was Evan van der Sar. So I would say that the thing about Vicario is that if you put him under pressure and concede lots of shots, he's saving, I think, 70% of his shots. What that means is that the more shots a goalkeeper has to save, the more he's under the cosh, and the more likely he is to make a mistake because he's already not feeling confident in his defense's ability to protect him. So while he is definitely at fault for a goal coming from that kind of angle, I would say that there's been largely an issue with the defense's organization in general that has resulted in that being something that we conceded from. We should improve on the goalkeeping position as a whole. I don't think it's a short-term need. He wouldn't look as bad in a team that's playing well. He just looks especially bad now because the whole team is disjointed and the defense isn't particularly at its best at the moment.
Dustin, thank you very much. Appreciate that as always. Justin, on this second goal, I mean, you mentioned there Vicario with the first. I mean, he's definitely going to be criticised by you, I get the feeling, for this one as well.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, he reminds me very much, and I think Phil will probably remember, Aurelio Gomez. Brilliant shot stopper. Honestly, you could shoot from all over and he'd save wonderfully. But my God, he had a clanger in him. And this is the same again. And the thing we've got to be looking at with regards to this is that when you look at where the club wants to get itself to and where it sees itself going, they don't have goalkeepers like this, right? Vicario does not get in David Raya. He doesn't get ahead of Donnarumma. He doesn't get ahead of Emi Martinez, people like that. These are top goalkeepers. And something that sums it all up more than anything else was Man City signing James Trafford and then all of a sudden realising, hang on a minute, there's a better option. We can go and get him. And I think this is where the problem has gone because, excuse me, no disrespect to Kinski, I don't think he's the option either. I mean, no top goalkeeper gets beaten from there. His positioning, the way he's just let it go over the top and in the centre. It's not like it's gone into top bins or anything like that. This is just something that has literally gone from him where he has not managed the situation properly. And I read a stat that said that of the goals conceded, 72% of it were down to Vicario. It's just, the improvement isn't there. To me, I'm not saying he's a bad goalkeeper. I just think he's at this level and the top keepers are at that level. And that is the problem. And this is now where I do think the goalkeeping situation does need to be addressed. I don't have a problem Kinski being given a run out, see if he can actually prove himself. But ultimately, what I've just been getting more and more fed up with on Vicario is this waving his arms around, slapping the ground, shouting at everybody else. And it's like, hang on a minute, look at yourself, because ultimately, if you're shouting at people, really they should be shouting back, because there's too many times. And let's not forget, when you've got a goalkeeper behind you as a defense, you won't trust him like that, because you'll sit there and think, I can't put him in that position because he'll make a mistake. So I'd rather, almost either sit too deep or take control of it, which could potentially lead to more risks, than trust my goalkeeper. Because I think that's the part of the problem here. I don't think that defense trusts Vicario. And if looking at it, and not just looking at Nottingham Forest, we can look at Fulham, we can look at other games, you can't blame them. As I said, he is a fantastic shot stopper. You know, that game against, it was in the Champions League where he kept us in it. I think it was Monaco away. And he had an unbelievable game. But that was because it was all instinct with him. It was all, make the save, make the save, make the save. There wasn't really any thought process that went into it. When he has to lead, when he has to take example and take control of that box, I think that is where the problem comes. And I think that's where it will just become more and more the norm, to be honest.
Justin, thank you. Philip, let's move on to Vicario then in general. Can Tottenham do better? Does Vicario get too much hate? I mean, they're two complete different questions there.
Well, I mean, we definitely can do better than Vicario. I think as pretty much everyone said, he's a great shot stopper, but he developed very late as a keeper, right? He was playing in Serie B or Serie C even when he was 23, I think. And he's played one season in Serie A, I think, before he came to Spurs. But he's number 2 for Italy, I guess, right? I agree, and with Justin in terms of the fact that I think that he creates confusion for the defenders as well, and the defenders don't trust him. I think the reality is that him on crosses, on corners, on organising the defence, I think he's completely subpar. If I'm being honest, he's a great shot stopper. We've seen amazing games from him, right, as you just said, but he's not a top. I mean, we're hardly top 4 or even top 6 at the moment, but he's not a top. I don't think he's a top 6 keeper. If I'm being honest, I don't think that he would. I don't think any of the other top teams in the Premier League who would be kind of top 4 to 6 would be signing him. And I think elsewhere in Europe, I think it would be kind of a bit similar. So I think the simple answer is we can do better than him. And I like Vicario though. Like as a, he seems like a bit of a interesting character. He's obviously a bit. He's what's the word? I don't. You know what I mean? He's just a bit like crazy, like eccentric. Like he has moments, right? But he's a character, and sometimes it's good to have people like that, in the team, right? And I think that I was hoping that he would maybe be able to work with, Thomas Frank's, coaches, because obviously we brought in a really good goalkeeping coach now, who was really highly rated. Obviously defensive coaches. I thought that, maybe he would be able to just spend time on the training ground, right, and literally just work on crosses, work on distribution, work on passing, work on, those kind of things, right? But I haven't really seen, that much, improvement from him. And as someone said, there was that stat saying that he's been responsible for or directly involved in 72% of all conceded goals. I mean, that's a damning stat. So again, long story short, I know some people like Kinski, some people don't. I still personally believe that Kinski's a massive talent. And he needs a small chance, or he needs a little run of games. Otherwise, he may as well go out on loan if he's not going to get enough games, and then we just play Austin or someone else. But if it was me, I would be making a bit of a sign, or making a, how do you say, like put a stand down and say, look, Vicario, whether we're going to say you're being dropped or not, you're being rested. Like, you deserve maybe just to go on the bench for a couple of games, right? Maybe a rest is good for him. It's not about being dropped or being, banished to the bench just because he's maybe making, mistake after mistake. But I think for him, maybe a little rest, a little break could be good. And probably Kinski deserves that chance based on what Vicario has kind of served up so far this season, really. Because I don't think it can go on like that. I don't think he can keep on, We can't keep playing games every week where he's directly at fault or involved, in 1 or 2 goals each week. That's just not conducive, right, to building a stable team. And Justin said it. I agree. I think that the defenders don't trust him, and that doesn't then help when it comes to organisation of the defence. Or panicking. They're like, what's he going to do? And then, as you said, to then complain and shout at the other players, like he did against Fulham, of course, when he did his massive mistake, and then he was screaming at everyone, and then he did it yesterday to Gray, and a lot of fans won't like that. So yeah, look, we do need, if we want to, it's not going to happen in January, is it? But I honestly would say in the summer, we need to be in the market, and to be honest, I can't give you any. I don't think I can give you any any good candidate options right now without kind of researching it or stuff. Although there's a couple of young Germans, there's a couple of young German goalkeepers actually, including one at Freiburg, who I would say would be good enough. But yeah, I think we need to make a move in the summer and replace him.
I think we do. Okay, thank you, Justin. You said you had a few names in mind. Would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, because I'll be honest, after that game, I did then start looking, and I kept thinking to myself, that because it feels right there. It's the balance with it, but it's the leader element. And one name that I look at and stands out for me is Mike Mannion at AC Milan. He's out of contract next summer. Unless they're going to be able to get a deal done, can they really afford to let him go? They turned down 30 million. They ain't going to get that. He's a French international goalkeeper. They even say it themselves that he is a leader. They trust him and things like that. For that sort of price, for the price, I think that you'd be able to get him for around 10 to 15 million pounds. That to me is an absolute no-brainer with regards to it. You've also got I think it's Andre Lunin at Real Madrid. He's not getting a lot of games, but is a fantastic goalkeeper there. You could potentially look at James Trafford because obviously, okay, it was the Championship, but he did well for them and a little bit of a wobble. But would City potentially look at cashing for him possibly? But we're talking about now when it comes to how serious this club wants to be. You go and get somebody like Mike Mannion from AC Milan. That is a top goalkeeper at a top club and a recognised international that would really show that there is this change now that we seem to be talking about. So that would be my number one choice, because everything around it seems to tick. If Tottenham can just swoop in, put the money on the table, I can't see how Milan can let him go for nothing. I really don't.
And another good reason for Mike Mannion as well is that, as an Italian team, they might take Vicario back for him. The other part is that he's also at the age where we're not blocking Kinski's progression, and if it's not Kinski, go for Trafford, right? So it's one of those things where the age kind of matters as well, because if it's too young a keeper, there's the experience issue, but there's also the idea of is Kinski willing to wait that long? And he's already starting to pipe up about not getting the game time he was promised. So there were games in the Champions League against Copenhagen, against Prague, where we could have let Kinski play. And it's a shame that he hasn't gotten that opportunity.
Dustin, lastly, on Vicario, before we do move on from him, I just want to, play devil's advocate purely so it doesn't feel like it's a battering of Vicario. He would turn around and say that he single-handedly has kept Tottenham in a lot of games. Monaco, for example, comes to my mind through his good saves. I mean, definitely a lot of mistakes in there that do lead to goals or do lead to potential goals of the opposition, but he has also saved us at times this season. So do you think he's a little bit overhated, Dustin?
I'm quite balanced about Vicario. So one thing about him is that he does sometimes make incredible saves because he has good responses, right? But I think sometimes he has to make the saves because he's not good at helping us build out from the back. So sometimes the saves that he has to make are partially as a result of us not being able to build up from the back as well, because he has an okay short passing range, terrible mid-range passing, and his long-range passing isn't particularly great. So when you seek to possess the ball and you seek to build up from the back, but you don't have a keeper that can do those passes, he can be a great shot stopper, but that modern goalkeepers don't just do that anymore, and he's not pulling his weight in helping us build up from the back. And sometimes that manifests itself in him having to save from maybe possessions we lost from build-up play that broke down because of him. So it's a bit of both.
Okay, Dustin, thank you very much. Next 60 seconds, just going to give a shout out to everyone that's listening on YouTube that's dropped a comment for those that are listening live. Spotlight on Spurs, big up to him. We have a great channel and podcast. He says, big up everyone. We have an international panel. Love to see it. You're absolutely right. Dustin from Singapore. We've got Philip as well from Frankfurt, Germany, and Justin along with myself from England. So yeah, there we go then. 3 different countries. Ronnie says, Frank out, jumping straight to it. We'll get onto Thomas Frank in just a little bit. Big up Nige, another Spurs YouTuber, says big up Harry, panel and chat. Smash that like, worrying performance. Could not agree more with all of that. David Clark, rather, he's always, more negative, or more, as he would say, sensible. He says it's Daniel Levy's legacy. Did Levy give Mourinho the players he needed? No. Did Levy give Conte all the players he needed? No. What are Spurs fans talking about? 60% of these players are tribe. He says, there we go. He said it how it is in his eyes. Melanie has said, big up to him. He says, Vicario has an incredibly high ceiling, but he also has an incredibly low floor. Interesting. We can't be dealing with that week in, week out, he says. He continues his comment by saying Vicario absolutely deserves to start, given Vicario's inconsistency. Thank you to him for getting involved. There are a few more comments now as we read them out coming through. David elaborating further, saying, I've watched the best goalkeepers in the world in football since the 1960s. And trust me, that a book was published of the history's best goalkeepers. The book will have to be 300 pages long at least for Vicario to even be shown. Fair enough, harsh. David says, like any other player, write a list of pros and cons of Vicario's traits. Positive shot stopping, cons, doesn't control his penalty area, parries the ball back out to play, punches when he should catch. That's very true, especially the last one. And David's put a final comment saying, with the ball at his feet, he's clueless, picks the wrong option 6 times out of 10. He's kicking when the ball is on the floor. He's like a 10-year-old. He barely gets the ball 8 foot out of the air. Big up to Luca. He says, hey guys, how are you? We're great. Thanks, Luca. Hope you are well. He says, have you guys seen there's a very high chance of Brennan Johnson going to Palace? Opinions on that? We'll discuss that towards the end of the podcast. Like the profile picture of Johnson. By the way, I haven't seen that icon before. Again, more comments coming through. Read out a couple more. Melanie says, even if our shot stopping gets worse, I don't see why Vicario, Kinski, doesn't get any minutes. He's shown that his distribution is reliable, and a system where we're struggling creatively. We need that. Very good shout. Kinski's long range distribution is superb. David says, I think Aston Villa's keeper is still unsettled and could be purchased. Okay. Trafford isn't one of the standard Spurs require to win trophies, so he prefers Martinez over James Trafford. Big up to Top Logic, another channel, saying hello, Harry, and the panel. David Clark is asking about goalkeepers. What do you think about goalkeepers? It's because from an early age, they realised they can be good at stopping shots, but stopping shots doesn't make a good goalkeeper. It's very true. Ideally, you have the all-round package, but it is unrealistic. But there we go. Just whiz through all the comments there. Please continue to get involved because we will read them out. I know I keep saying last thing on it, but I just want a really, really short answer, and ideally one word if possible. Who would you start in goal against Liverpool? Ideally, you just say either Vicario or Kinski, but if you feel you have to justify, please do and keep it short. Let's say to you, Philip. Justin, I'll come to you first. Kinski or Vicario against Liverpool?
Kinski.
Love it. Dustin?
Kinski, he had a great debut against the last time as well.
Okay, going Kinski as well. Philip, I think you're going to say Kinski.
Yep. Kinski.
Good stuff. I'm actually not sure. That's why I asked the question. I'm very is it the right game to do so? But when is the right time to experiment with something like that? Very difficult. I think Newcastle as well, if I'm not mistaken, are similar. And going for that similar kind of thing. I believe that Ramsdale is the number one now with Nick Pope coming out. I think that Champions League mistake that Pope made, very like Vicario's against Fulham, was a cherry on top, or the icing on the cake, as some will say. But let's review the third goal, then we'll talk how we feel post-match. But Forest, load of other things as well. Frank, Johnson, you name it. We'll discuss it all here. So if you're listening live, stay tuned. Or if you're listening after as well, keep listening, keep getting involved as well. But the third goal for Forest, we've been talking of cherry on top, icing on the cake. This was it for Forest and Sean Dyche. 79th minute, Sangare. I mean, Justin, what a beautiful goal this was. And we're getting to what more Spurs could have done to prevent that moment. But you've got to say, what a hit.
I think it's you could be critical. Could they rush out quicker? Could they give him less time on the ball? I think it's just one of those ones that you just have to look at. He's caught it sweet. It's beaten him. It's gone in off the post. I think you could be, you'd be very harsh. I mean, you've got it there on the screen. Could people have got out quicker to him? I don't think it would have honestly made that much of a difference with regards to it. So, maybe, that's the thing. But obviously where it says about the fact that we're third on league for shots allowed outside the box, you almost think actually, and this is maybe more of the way we think about Vicario, we do it maybe because he's a better shot stopper. So if we're all sitting here and saying he's a better shot stopper than distributor and leader, maybe you would then goad people to shoot him from outside the box because of the fact that you don't trust Vicario. So if somebody does wallop it in the way that Sangare does, you have to just, tip your cap. Well done. Thank you very much. Cracking goal. But if he doesn't hit it as properly, you would probably back Vicario to save it. It had to be a world beater to beat him from that distance. And I think that is Thomas Frank playing to the qualities of the goalkeeper he's got.
It just does frustrate.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I think my take on it is that Frank has stated, I think he's done masterclass or like some of his other interviews where he's talked about how he feels that long shots are low percentage chances. So it's very likely that in training or when they do drills, he tells the players that don't take the long shot if there's a better option. And I think it's a psychology that seeps into players where not only do they not take long shots, but there's potentially the idea as well that if the other team takes long shots, that's a low percentage chance, and we're happier for them to take a long shot than to penetrate us down the center. So I'm not saying that he's specifically saying let them shoot at us, but these are psychological things that can affect the team that go, oh, they're taking a long shot, that's fine. We don't worry as much about that because our coach doesn't think those are an issue.
What about you, Phil? What do you think? Do you think, the Frank would rather have it so that he trusts Vicario more to save it? Or do you think it's poor, positioning on the players? Where do you sort of stand? Because as I say, there seems to be a lot of shots that are being taken from outside the box, more than what we would normally see. What do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. I think he's clearly said that he'd rather the team shoot from outside, far away, because we do have a higher chance of saving it. What I would also say though is that that's probably based on maybe the midfield or the defense or whoever's in those gaps, maybe to still be able to close down a bit better, because a lot of the long shots that we have conceded, there has been big gaps in front of it, and I'm not quite sure whether that's just again the team not really being effective enough, in terms of where the people are being positioned, where the players should be. I think that Frank is clearly like doing it like that, but I think that he probably would expect, honestly, that the centre midfielders or the people who are kind of there would be closer, to the person taking the shot, because we do seem to hold off quite a lot. And I, as I said, I think that that's just due to the team not being effective enough still, not the players not kind of being where they should be, right? Or not moving into space, or not being, quick enough or dynamic enough, mobile enough. I see a lot of issues there at the moment in terms of what our players are doing and what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not doing, and I think that that's an issue as well. So that I think that can only get better. To be honest, I think that once the midfield is more effective and possibly the structure of the team is a bit better, that we will concede less, long shots, because there will hopefully be more long shots that are actually blocked or closed down. To be honest.
When I was taking the screenshot for that, Paulinho had time to get in front of the shot, but he didn't. So I think that the other part of it is that even if you don't block the shot, right? Let's say he doesn't shoot, you can see someone on the penalty spot that's free as well. So you should be closing down, even if it's not blocking the shot. You should be closing down so that they don't make a through pass as well. So I think it's just lack of pressure on the ball, which is the problem.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Agreed.
That's fair. Right, good points. Thank you very much. But it did unfortunately end Nottingham Forest 3, Tottenham 0. Justin, what one word would you use to challenge you to describe that performance by Tottenham?
Disappointing. Really, just disappointing. From what it looked like we were building, it felt like we'd taken 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. So yeah, in a word, disappointing.
Thank you, Philip. I mean, this will probably be really similar because performance and result, a lot of people say go hand in hand in this case. But what one would you use to describe this result for Tottenham?
Underwhelming. Just, no show. But I think as we said before, maybe there was some fans a bit more positive ahead of this game, like I was. I know Dustin said he wasn't as positive. I think I got a bit carried away after the last 2 wins. Maybe I didn't factor in the quality of the opposition and the fact that the opposition didn't press us at all. And again, whenever we come up against teams that actually press us hard with energy, we seem to have no answer. That's something we haven't talked about yet. But like literally every time this season, when teams come out there and they've been on our case, we can't deal with it. We have no solution to deal with it. Seemingly, we fold. And they're first to every ball. There's gaps. Like it's just, So from that perspective, it's completely underwhelming because we hoped, but it didn't happen. And again, how can you just turn up like that after, so much more rest as well? But again, just to quickly say, it's for me, it's on the players. That's on the players, right? Like, I mean, Frank, by the sounds of it, is setting the team up to actually play in a different way in some respects to how to how many people are saying he's playing. They've gone out there with a clear plan, but they're not able to implement it. And when they drop stinkers like that, where every single individual performance is so bad and they can't pass the ball, 5 meters, that's on the players in some shape or form. So I don't know, there's a lot to do for Frank, obviously, as we know, but like the players have got to look at themselves here. Where's the pride? Oh, where's the pride to go out there and know that you did everything you can? Because we obviously didn't. Nowhere near. So we can talk about Frank as much as actually as much as we want as well. But what is going on with the players? People like Porro. Oh, it's annoying.
No, you're right.
It's frustrating.
Appreciate that, Philip. No, it's honestly, it's just so painful, and I want to get into a couple of bits just in a bit about Frank, about substitutes, a few things that are interesting and worthy of discussion. But first, Dustin, would you say in your eyes it feels like 1 step forward and 2 or 3 steps back?
I'm not particularly surprised because even when we have decent results, I try to divorce the result from the performance, and there have been times that we haven't really performed that well even though we've got the result across the line, and I've then not really been as excited as I should be that we've won the game, because I look at it and go, how did we win the game? Did we have a pattern of play? And I think the issue I have right now isn't so much about results, but it is about identity. What are our patterns of play? Where do we look to overload? What's our trademark? Like with Conte, it was like, a fullback to fullback goal. There would be a goal that, people would post online that that's Conte ball. right? With Mourinho, we had Son and Kane in their pomp, making counter-attacking runs, running into space. There were trademark goals with each coach that we saw. With Poch, it was wing backs, fast vertical ball progression. With Ange, it was like, short pass build up from the back, inverted wing backs and cutbacks. What is Frank's attacking identity? Where does he create chances from? It can't just be set pieces and win your duels. So I think the gap that I see, and we can talk about the quality of the players as well, that certainly plays a part. But even with lower quality players, there's an underlying philosophy that informs the play. Because we've seen teams come up from the championship and maybe they get relegated, but we see the football they try to play and we say that's their identity. I mean, Norwich have done it a couple of times, right? Where we look at them and go, oh, they have a pattern of play. We know what they try to do. We know what their identity is. They may not have good enough players to succeed with that, but we know what their attacking identity is. I don't know what our attacking identity is. I don't know how we seek to create chances. I don't know what the big idea is for us to break teams down if we need to. And that's where I have the concerns.
Good points raised. And honestly, I can't tell you how much there is to discuss in such little time. But for me, I think Forest deserve credit in the situation. It's very easy, and I think must not forget about how bad we were. I'm not saying that, and I don't want to take any spotlight off Spurs, but I think also you have to go look, credit to Nottingham Forest. Sean Dyche has come in 7 wins out of 12 across all competitions, completely transformed where they were, and it's only not recognised because the likes of Leeds United, West Ham have picked up a lot more points in recent weeks. The fact it looks like Forest haven't really gone anywhere is quite the contrary. They've made a real difference and they look very good. And this was a big performance, and they could, in my view, have won by more goals. Do you think, Justin, that's the concerning thing, that, not only did Forest play us off the park and win 3-0, that if we're being honest and true to ourselves, they could and should have won by more?
Yeah, sadly, I think you're probably right. But I think we've got to look at the fact that, we're 11th at the moment in the league. We could possibly be 12th by the end of today. How much better are we? When you look at that group of players, how many of those players do you think are good enough to be in the Champions League? Let alone playing for a club that is now wanting to be bigger than where it is. It's won a European trophy, hence the T-shirt I'm wearing. But, it's turning around and wanting to be at these sort of levels. But then, we keep signing players that, I think Phil said it earlier about a game plan's been put out and they just can't, they can't take it forward. They can't actually acknowledge it and they can't actually progress with regards to that. So, and I saw earlier on today about, how Vinay did something similar about backing Arteta when he was getting struggles, because they finished, I think, 8th twice. The difference there was that Arteta was allowed to clear out the dead wood. The problem that we have at the moment, and this is where we'll probably get into it in a few moments, but the ownership now needs to start having a clear look at what are we meant to be, because we are a team that, let's face facts, we beat City at City, right? 2-0, we managed that game, we were brilliant, and then we go and stink out of Forest, right? But if you said to people, any Spurs fan this season, you're going to put in some amazing results, but you're going to stink the place out at times, they'd have gone, yeah, sounds about right. Last year, we walloped City 4-0, and then we lost ridiculous games and looked absolutely shambolic. Too many of these players, I think, live in the mindset that I'm going to outlast the manager. I don't need to impress you. I can do what I want to do because they'll get rid of you before they get rid of me. And that is the thing where the club needs to now look at itself with some of these players. The fact of, and okay, I know you said about the substitutions not being good enough, and there's fair cop with that. But there are players that are playing in this team that, for where the club is at the moment, you'd probably say quite reflective of it. Maybe slightly higher, but you're sort of competing for Europa League, Europa Conference League. You're certainly not competing for Champions League or anything higher than that.
Justin, thank you for your honesty as always. Before we get onto the subs and that, there's a couple of individuals I do want to touch on. One of them is on screen there. If you're listening on YouTube, you should be able to see it as well. If you are listening on a podcast platform and if you're in the right country to do so, you should see this footage as well. And it's just a few slides on Mohamed Kudus and just generally about teammates in the box and maybe not working, as effectively as we can as a team. Kudus, I think we can all be in agreement, has been great since signing for the club, and some would argue maybe rely too much on him. But Philip, I'm going to come to you. Yesterday, I was at work, I'm not going to lie, I only saw some of the game on my lunch break, about 20-25 minutes. But what I picked up from that was a load of things. And one of them was that Kudus looked good, but was constantly running into players. Constantly, running into players. And that was just frustrates me because we know what he's capable of. And there were teammates around him. So do you think Kudus should be less selfish, using yesterday as an example? Or is it the fact that maybe he doesn't trust his teammates? Because our passing was woeful in this game.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Kudus was really good recently, admittedly against, sub or more subpar opposition, right? But I think yesterday, nothing really worked, right? Coming forward, the players weren't running into space properly. When they had a player in space to pass it to, they just seemingly couldn't do it or didn't see it. Kudus did have his head down and just ran into men the whole time. I don't know. I don't know if I can just blame Kudus for that. I don't know if they just get panicked or again because Forest just basically completely wrestled control of the game, right? From the first second.
He could be so much better, couldn't he, Kudus? He's a great player that we rely on, but do you just think if he just changed his game a little bit, sometimes kept it a little bit simpler, got others involved, it would make his life easier and the team have more success?
Maybe, but he's shown it on in a lot of games though, where he has actually gone wide and then clipped the ball across, or where he's obviously scored. I can't remember if it was Leeds or whatever else, or Everton or something, but where he's come inside and taken a shot. But I think that he could play it a lot easier, but he probably feels I don't know if he feels the pressure or the kind of almost the requirement or the need to be that creative outlet, because we can't do anything else. He's our only creative outlet, right? Where when he gets the ball, he can actually go past the player. We don't have any other dribblers. Maybe Xavi now, if he's on, if he's fit, right? He can kind of go past the player. But Kudus is our only single, winger or forward or midfielder who has the ability to take on multiple players and actually beat them. So yeah, he could play it much easier sometimes, but I can understand why he maybe holds onto the ball too long. Maybe he feels that there's no one else in the team kind of who's able to do that, and he feels almost the need to do it when he shouldn't be. But when the other players aren't really doing it on duration, then it's also difficult for Kudus, I think. To kind of, I'm just defending him a bit here because I don't think
he's been good.
I don't think the way that we're playing at the moment. Kudus, we're not getting the best out of him, but he's still the only player that possibly could go past the player and pass that ball across the box or something. Do you know what I mean? So I don't really blame him too much for that. But again, I also think that maybe the players lost their heads as well yesterday, didn't they, at the end of the day, in some shape or form, because they were getting battered by Forest. They were second best, and then in those moments they start panicking, they start what's going on, why what's going on here. And even Kudus probably was in that situation, I think, personally. We need to get the team working where Kudus doesn't have all the pressure on him to make something happen. If he doesn't have to think about it the whole time, maybe someone else is doing it on the left as an example, or even Xavi in the centre, then maybe Kudus can get into more dangerous positions where he gets the ball. Why does he always have to dribble from the half pitch? Do you know what I mean? If he can get the ball on the edge of the penalty box or further, in the centre, then that's where, if he does a trick, he can either get to a shot or he can pass it for maybe an assist. And I think that's what we need to get him, more doing. And that's where we need to sort our gameplay out.
Philip, thank you. Dustin, do you have anything to add on Mohamed Kudus?
Yeah, I think I clipped up all of these, right? So I'm not trying to start a pylon on Kudus, but I think that in part it's because we relied on him so heavily, and he was our outball, he was our creative outlet. So it's kind of like changed the way he's playing as well, right? Because he was doing a lot more crossing. He was not going outside at every opportunity. He used to come inside as well. But for this game, in particular, like one of the slides, right? He deliberately chose the path where he would go into like everyone. Yeah, over here. He's literally got empty space in front of him to go into, and he cuts outside instead so that there are three people blocking him. So it almost feels like he's entered his Lucas Moura arc where my head is down and I'm going to dribble. And I think that's also because on the right side, we don't have many like people to interplay with, because what you have is Porro, and Porro is not like a one-touch, one-two kind of player. Whereas on the left, if you have like Odebear, you have Xavi, you have a lot more ways of interplaying there. So it feels like we have a specific way of playing down the right and a completely different way of playing down the left. And as a result, all of the people that play down the left have a different way of progressing the ball from the right. And that means that we do all the one-touch plays and bounce passes on the left, and then the right is just dribblers and deep crosses. So it's Porro deep crosses and Kudus dribbling, and on the left it's like Odebear, Tel, Xavi, and they're trying to do interplay there. Whereas we should be actually doing it in the center and on the right side as well. And at the times that Xavi did go on the right side, he tried to interplay with Kudus, but Kudus just fixated on dribbling. And that's where I think we are not making the most of what we could do. Because if we had Bergvall and Xavi on the right, for example, Kudus has the option to then not have to dribble 5 people at a time. He can play a 1-2 and beat one man. So I think it's knowing that Kudus is playing well, but if he played a little differently and a little smarter, he would get so much more out of him as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other individual I want to briefly mention, Justin, is Richarlison, who we all know, seeing the stats that 17 goals from starts or coming off the bench these last 24-25 games, which even shocked me. But did it feel like he's playing Sabutio in this game with the ball just bouncing off him and unable to hold up the ball?
He's such a frustrating player, because the stats you say there to the player on the pitch is very much chalk and cheese. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. I think the thing though is that he's in the position that he's in where he can get the goals, because when you look at what's around him and you look at where it could be coming from, let's be honest, there's a lot of talk about us signing Kolo Muani on a permanent basis. He hasn't scored a single Premier League goal for us. In fact, the only goals he scored were against his parent club. I know he's got a lot of attributes that we're sort of positive about, but we've got to be very careful. We spent big money on Tel, and we haven't so far seen a return on that. So, it is one of those things that you just look at with Richarlison and you just think it just does not make any sort of sense, because there are times he can go wandering. There's times where, as you say, it can be, Sabutio football, as you call it. And then there are other times where he'll get himself in a position, he'll get himself a goal, but he never, it's just such an enigma, because he looks like a player that nobody would trust, but it's kind of, we're having to make the best of a bad situation. I think it's more critical of the players around him, because of the fact that he is our top scorer, because he's, as a striker, he shouldn't be at Tottenham, to be honest. But the saddest part is he is our top scorer because nobody else can come anywhere near him. which I think is a real sad situation, and I think is very, something the club needs to really address, and it has to now address starting from next month.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin, for that. Philip, I'll come to you. Subs that Frank made, he defended after the game, bringing on two defenders on when we were 2-0 down, and it took 80 minutes to bring on the likes of Brennan Johnson and Matthias Tell. We did bring on Bergvall earlier, but he just explained how, we lacked that balance, so bringing on more offensive players wouldn't have helped. I mean, we're no experts compared to what Frank does know, but it does seem strange, doesn't it? To have someone like Odebese on the bench, who didn't get on at all, by the way, and Johnson and Tell, taking 80 minutes. I'd argue they both would have a bite between their teeth to prove a point. Tell, after originally being left out of Champions League squad and now being added back in, has generally a point to prove to get into the team. Johnson being his old club. Are you surprised they only got on for about 9.5 minutes?
Yeah, I was. I mean, at the time when the subs happened, and obviously with the Davies sub coming in, like I think probably most fans pretty angry, couldn't quite understand it. In retrospect, I can understand why Frank thought maybe bringing on Davies was a good move, just to give more balance to the team, like with a left footer, because it was clear that Spence wasn't working at all. There's some games where Spence is quite good, right, on the left, but it wasn't working at all. And I think he might just have thought, if I bring a bit more balance in there, and Davies is relatively secure, then, we might get balls down the line, so I can understand why he did that. But I wasn't happy about it. But, look, I mean, Odebert and Tell especially, I don't know why Tell isn't getting more minutes, because whenever he's come on, he's always looked fairly dangerous. Like, he's created some opportunities, like he's either got an assist or he's scored, or he's kind of, looked dangerous, especially on the left. But I also don't understand why Tell maybe doesn't even get a chance, I was going to say up front, even in some games again, now that he's fit. At the beginning of the season, he got a couple of games playing up front, but he was isolated because Xavi wasn't, in the mix yet, and Tell didn't look quite fit either. Either he plays Moani in the centre then and can play Tell out left, or as I said, Odebert could play there as well. I think Frank, I don't know why he kept on Richarlison so long. I don't know why he kept him on, because it was clear that he was struggling as well, and it was pinball with him, wasn't it? But
Philip, then can I? Sorry to interrupt. Can I press that point about Spence that you made earlier and ask you if you think that Spence limits us going forward, because of course it's not his natural side. It's not his natural side in terms of being right-footed. Yeah. It's not the right in terms of position either. Does it prevent us going forward? And if so, also with Davies coming on, how's it going to help in terms of going forward? Because we all know Davies isn't known for his attacking input at all.
I think that whenever Spence plays on the left, unless he's playing against a subpar team, particularly like he did against even Brentford and Slavia Prague, he got a lot of space and he was actually running forwards, but that was because there was no one then to tackle him or to press him. But I would say normally for me, Spence isn't a good option for us on the left at all, and he does limit us coming forward. It's also difficult when he receives the ball into him as well as an out ball, because he always wants to take it on his right foot. And that's why I always thought that if Udogie's fit, which sadly he isn't, and that's why we need another left back anyways, we just have automatic more balance on there. And Udogie does come forward. Davies doesn't come forward, obviously, certainly not at the moment. But I can understand why he maybe thought that he could just bring a bit more left-footed balance on the left, possibly. Yeah, I can understand why he wanted that, but personally, I would have been up. I would have probably shifted, if it was my decision. I would have even shifted Mickey Van der Ven out to the left to create an attacking outlet, right up and down the wing. I know we're a bit worried about his hammies, but he plays there for Holland, for the Netherlands, right? I think Van der Ven's basically playing left back for Netherlands nowadays. So I know theoretically we also say that he's better with Romero as that amazing centre-back partnership, but they're not tearing up trees there. And we do have Danso, we've got Dragosin to come back. in terms of creativity and offering like some power down the left while Sidoghi's injured, maybe it's an idea for Frank to have a look at Mickey there on the left, to be honest. But Frank does need to work on his subs, I think, because sometimes he does. I can't understand the sub sometimes, or why he persists with a player so long, when maybe it's clear that if we've got players like Odebert or Tell, they can at least try and change the game.
Okay. Thank you very much, Philip. Appreciate again your honesty and your input regarding that. Let's move on then to Thomas Frank. I think this is now a discussion that has to be had. Let's put it that way. And I just want to put out there and go that I am behind Frank, to put it as it is. This is purely the fact I think the turnover of managers at Tottenham, for me, is getting to the point now I'd say it's sickening and it's poisonous. Almost the fact that we sack managers unnecessarily, we appoint the wrong managers that may go now. We don't know. We believe you not being here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Frank has that automatic right to stay just because maybe Tottenham got it wrong in the past. I think I'm all for the conversation. Justin, can I kick it off with you? Thomas Frank, are you Frank in, Frank out, and feel free to justify your thinking at this moment in time?
To be honest, I am Frank in, because we got to look at, and I think we sort of said it earlier, we've got players here, or you've got a couple of players here back from when Pochettino was in charge. And too many times the players have just turned around and you can see them thinking, well, I don't fancy this guy, so I'll just wait until he moves and I'll get another guy comes in and I'll deal with him. And I think this is something that we can't just sit there, because we all can, so many people, I've seen it on social media, people saying, get Frank out, he doesn't what he's doing, this, that, and the other. Well, did Mourinho know what he was doing when we asked for him to go? Did Conte know what he was doing when we asked for him to go? Pochettino, got us to a Champions League final. We wanted him out. Ange Postecoglou won us a trophy. We wanted him out. And when you look at so many of those players, they come from an era. And I think this is the other part that comes into it. Okay. The club itself has done something quite unimaginable that I would have never expected, in their ownership of the club. When it was Joe Lewis, it was very much to Daniel Levy, make me money and run the club, keep it in the Premier League. That's all I care about, right? If you can get top four, great. If not, don't worry about it. And he did that. He ran Tottenham like a fantastic business. He had a great business model. Was making money. We were, doing well. He's been able to get us a stadium. And everything with regards to that. But there was clearly no real aspirations in terms of actually winning anything. Okay, so we're now at a point where the Lewis family have stuck their neck out, stuck their head up at the parapet, and have basically said, no, this is now what we want. This is now what we're looking to do. So you can't then, you've either, and I think the questions about Frank going, I know they've said they've backed him, but we've seen this before where owners have backed a manager and then sacked a manager. I don't really think that holds much weight. You could almost call that the kiss of death, if you like. Mm. But I think the owners have to get this right? In that if they're going to back Frank in January, they back him big. And they really show they're not messing around by getting Deadwood out the door, Ben Davies out the door, is Kevin Danzo good enough? Not really. What about Dragusin? Not really. Richarlison, possibly Tell, possibly Odebert, Johnson, I know I've heard the rumours about him with Palace, and I do think that's a good move because I think that's the level he should be at. But they need, this window itself, for me, has to be a statement. I know Vinay in that the Q&A they did with the fans said that January is difficult. Well, you've stuck your neck out. You've stuck your head out there. You don't really have that excuse because you've got a manager who is trying to deal with, in all fairness, an inept squad. A squad that is not a top six squad, that finished 17th, and he's trying to bridge the gap from, in effect, the top four to finishing 17th. So with those players, I think it is very difficult for him to do. The only thing that may change any of this is the fact that the next few games, I think we've got another, 2 to 3 games. He loses all of those. I think that's going to cause a problem. At the moment, I'm Frank in. Time will tell, though, over this period, whether he's going to be there for the long haul or not.
Okay, thank you. We're cautious of time because a lot of us have to jump in terms of on the panel. So let's whiz through thoughts on Frank and then move on to Brendan Johnson. Dustin, Frank in, Frank out?
I'm never manager out because there's a power vacuum, and what if you replace him with total plonker, right? So it's never Frank out as much as is who's in. And this can even be the case when you have a manager that's doing decently, if you need to replace the manager such that you can jump up a level. At this moment, I don't see managers that are an improvement that are available that would come to Spurs. Unless you can tell me that we're getting Xavi Hernandez or Xabi Alonso or something else, but I don't see that happening. So I'm never a manager out. I'm who do you think is a better replacement, and does the replacement have players that fit his style? Because we've changed styles back and forth. My problem is that we've had pragmatic managers before, like Mourinho and Conte. Is Frank going to be a better pragmatic manager than the both of them? And if that's not worked out for us in the past, why do we persist in switching between styles of football that result in very, very long rebuild periods where we have players that don't fit the style and the change in style of manager?
Okay, Dustin, thank you. Appreciate that. Philip, can you give your brief thoughts, Frank in, Frank out?
I'm Frank in for now. I've been Frank in. Well, I've been a big fan of Frank since we hired him. And it was after the Fulham game and also yesterday where I kind of started, questioning him a bit, like in terms of some of the stuff and, decisions and lack of progress and these kind of things. So I do have reservations about Frank. But I'm certainly not Frank out because, the club have obviously trusted in him to do a rebuild. And a manager like Frank can do a rebuild, I think, with the way that he does play. And he can play more attacking football, right? He's not just like a Mourinho manager, right? He can play more attacking. But the proof's going to be in the pudding as to whether he gets, back now in January and whether he can maybe get some of these players to deliver more for him, right? Because at the moment, some of these players, frankly, they just look like they're either not interested or they, don't believe in it or something. So, he deserves a chance. There's no point flip-flopping on managers all the time. And as the other guys have said, who do we get in anyways? Frank is a proven Premier League manager, right? Probably with we hope, with an upside, right? With a higher ceiling, right? And this is the first opportunity he's got with a bigger club. I don't think it's fair for fans to say, oh, he's just a mid-table manager. He hasn't got it. He hasn't got it in his locker, right? To be. We don't know that yet. He's only been here for a couple of months. So I'm Frank him. As Justin says, though, if he loses the next, if we get thrashed by Liverpool, and then it's quite a difficult run of games, isn't it? Palace, I think, then away, and then like if he loses the next 3-4 games, then it's going to be a problem. And I think we said a couple of weeks ago, we might get to the point where the club almost has to make a decision on him, if we just don't get enough points. But I'm hoping we don't. So I'm Frank in for now. I'm hoping that we do, spend a bit of money in January, and we get the balance of the team a bit better. And then let's see where we are. He deserves a season, and then we see where we are in the summer, and then who knows.
Philip, thank you. Do you think this fun now on YouTube and on Spotify and all of that as well sums up the feeling of the game? I think it certainly does. Just wanted to put that out there. I mean, that just sums everything up. Sometimes, you don't need to always explain, and that face from me shows it all and tells it all, that's for sure. Can I ask you, Dustin, Brennan Johnson, there's been a lot of links with him to Crystal Palace. For you, what would you do if you were the club? Should we be keeping him, whether it be as a starter or as a squad option, or should we be looking at potentially loaning or more likely selling him out? And if you think that, what's the kind of price range that we should be, again, where we go, look, let's accept this? Where is that kind of price range?
So we fired the manager that won us the title, and we're about to sell the player that won us the Europa League. I mean, it says everything, right? Look, Brendan Johnson is a limited player for a lot of people, and they have frustrations with him because you think of a winger and you're like, that's not a winger, he's not beating his man. But he pops up in the right place to score goals. And Ange understood that and, played him to optimize for that role. If we're not going to play him in that way, then his skill set doesn't fit, and clearly he needs to be sold. To Crystal Palace before their game against us, are you mad? This is a very Dr. Tottenham thing to do, but I think that if we are going to persist with a coach that will not play him to his strengths, and if we are Kudus, who basically plays in his position, that's our main source of creativity, then there's not much space for him, and he should be sold. We can probably get maybe 20 to 30 for him. Whether we should sell him to Palace, which would be strengthening a club that may compete with us for Europe, is another question. I don't think we should, but I think that he doesn't fit Frank's system clearly. Frank doesn't think much of him and hasn't played him very much.
Yeah, he certainly hasn't. Yeah, I'll have to see what happens with Brendan Johnson's future. But I think that kind of wraps us up nicely. Thank you. Philip just had to jump there. You can follow him across all socials. He has a lot of good stuff, and he's got a lot of content as well, maybe for himself, coming soon. So make sure to check him out at Frankfurt Spurs. Justin, big thank you to you. Great to have you on again. Sorry, this is carbon copy, isn't it? It's like AI here. Thank you for coming on despite the defeat. But where can people find you?
Yeah, so obviously at JJ Coder with regards to Twitter and Instagram. Obviously, I do the regular loan roundups. We'll be looking to get another one of those out tomorrow. And obviously we've got Mikey Moore playing today, so that's why the likelihood is it'll be out tomorrow. So I've also trying to join the 21st century of TikTok. So give us a follow on there. And as always, thank you so much for giving me the time to come on.
No worries. Thank you. And if you want to jump now, because I know you do have to go.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Justin.
See you later.
All the best. Thank you so much. And Dustin, before I get your socials, I've got one last question for you, if you don't mind. Do you think Spurs risk becoming a mid-table club without an identity? Because some people are saying that. I mentioned it in the intro. Is that going too far? Is that a bit too harsh? Or can you understand why that's kind of been thrown around at the moment?
I think we already are. If you look at where we finished last season, and if you look at, one of the things that people talk about is the quality of players. And there were times in the past where that was a bit overblown. We did have good players that were playing underneath their quality. But I don't think that's the case now. I think if you look at the quality of the players that we have, as we said earlier, is Vicario really a Champions League level keeper? Right? I can think of multiple teams that have, objectively speaking, better keepers that you would expect of a top 5, top 6 team. Similarly, Richarlison is our top scorer. Is Richarlison a Champions League level striker? That's another question to answer as well. If you look at positions where you would think, do we have the top 6 player in that position? Morgan Gibbs-White plays better in his position than we have right now, right? And they're what level? They're the bottom half of the league. So I would say that the hierarchy and the way that we've handled signings has left us a mountain to climb, and we've got a lot of quality mismatches, and particularly we can be doing a lot better with signings. That's for sure. As you can see from the graphic, we're bottom of the league for true balls. We are top of the league for miscontrols. And and the players that are top of league for miscontrols are Kudus, Simmons, Richarlison, and Kolomuani. So this is the quality that we have to play with at the moment. And there are some players there that are good, but there are some players that are not at the level we need to be if we are serious about competing.
Dustin, thank you. A couple more questions, actually, if you don't mind. If you don't mind continuing, one of them is about Jed Spence. He was angry in his reaction after coming off being substituted. I understand it partly. I mean, some will say that's an attitude problem, but I think what I'd hope more in this case is just the fact that it's against Forest. He wants to prove a point, and he's frustrated he cannot prove a point. Hopefully, it's more frustration maybe with his own performance or the team's performance rather than the kind of spoilt part. How do you view it, and what did you make of his reaction at the time?
Angry players are good. It means they care, right? Ultimately, if a player gets substituted and he's angry, and as long as he's not throwing the shirt on the ground and stamping over it, like players we've had in the past, if they're angry about so if they're angry about not getting to play and they are making an effort to play, that's fine. For example, when Gray made the mistake that cost us a goal, he also got our only shot on target, right? And it felt like he was so hungry to make amends that he was almost maybe not listening to instructions, but he was actually providing a lot of attacking threat. If we look at like the key passes, some of them are from Gray, right? Because he's serious about making amends for conceding that goal. So I think that whenever a player is angry, we should maximize that. We should use that because it means they're hungry. It means that they care. And Spence is not everyone's cup of tea because of the welcome to the penitentiary stuff. But it just means he's competitive. It just means he cares about winning. And we need more of that, not less.
Really just appreciate that ultimately, Dustin. Just want to bring something up here that's been a topic of conversation, today. And that is the record now under Frank compared to last season under Ange. So in the 24-25 season under Ange Postecoglou, we had 23 points after 16 games, whereas this season under Frank, we have one less with 22 points. Dustin, how do you view this? And do you think context is important? Because last year was the Europa League and this year Champions League, which, factually, generally speaking, means the games are tougher. Is that important to consider here when having this kind of discussion?
Yeah, it's never easy to compare across seasons because things have changed a lot. One thing that seems to be constant is our injury problems. So look, it's very easy to look in the rearview mirror and go, what if we kept Ange? I do think about that because ultimately there is an intangible there, which is however badly he did in the league, you saw how unified the fan base was during that parade, during that ceremony. You saw how all of the players were behind him. So it's not sentimentality. That stuff matters because it means everyone's pulling in the same direction. And I think that when you decide to switch out a manager, it's always about who you replace him with. And I would say that it's not on Frank as a person, but it's on the change of style. I think what's hurt Spurs the most is that when we change a manager, we don't just change the manager, we vacillate between the style of play. You go from Poch to Mourinho, then Nuno, then Conte, and they all require different things. Conte wants his old man players that are really expensive, and then you're stuck with them, and you've got to you've got Perisic there on the books, while you have a coach that that needs legs and can't really use him. So I think the point would be succession needs to be planned better. And that's why when you ask me if I'm Frank out, I'm like, I can't say I'm Frank out because who are you replacing him with? You got to replace him with someone that doesn't cause disruption or doesn't mean 2-3 years of rebuild because now there are all these players that don't fit the new coach's style and you need to ship them out. So I think it's the long-term planning. And this is where it's not a coach problem, it's a club hierarchy problem. This is where we need to put pressure on the club hierarchy, which is fix what you're doing and don't keep firing the manager as the scapegoat, because the problem is the club needs to plan succession better. It needs to sign players that fit no matter who the manager is. Even if you replace this manager, you're replacing him with a manager that can use the same players because your director of football has decided that this is our style of play. So I'm very clear about separating what is the manager's fault and what is the club hierarchy's fault. And I can't blame Frank for everything, but what I have pinned on Frank is stuff around style of play, stuff around, like, you know, the way we develop, the way we attack. That I think is on Frank, but the other stuff I don't think is.
Another stat here as well. Tottenham picked up just 22 points across their opening 16 Premier League games this season. We said that there, but that's the last time Spurs recorded fewer at this stage of the league campaigns in 2008-2009 season. There we go, where they had 18 points then, so 4 less than we do now. What do you make of that? I mean, it is concerning, I know, but facts and statistics like this, they're flipped and kind of just shown the facts that kind of like support someone's argument. You don't often see the fact, just don't see some of the stats that actually back up Frank. There aren't many at the moment, I appreciate that, but there are some that are, in his favour.
Yeah, I guess so. I think the ones that worry me the most are like the attacking stats. Like, multiple halves of football with no shots on target, right? That you can say that stats don't matter, use your eyes. I can use my eyes and see that we've not entered the penalty box this half. Yeah. So that matters, right? So I would say that for me the main thing is I don't understand his plan for attacking teams. And it, like I said earlier, it can't just be set pieces and winning duels. That is a good to have. It can't be the main source of creativity. So the fact that we have 7 through passes this entire season is ridiculous. We're lowest in the league for through passes. So that is where my concerns are, regardless of results. Right? It means that we're not making passes or making runs. We are not using creative players. As you saw with the slides I showed of Kudus, when Bentancur and Xavi make a good run, he spurns the chance to pass there. So it's not an individual player's fault. I mean, you can blame the individual player, but it means that from a coaching perspective, we don't have set ways of this is how we do it. This is how we isolate the team's left back. This is how we overload this side. This is how we pull players to this side and we exploit the space there. These are things that I expect attacking coaches to do, because they understand that we're going to have more possession, we're going to have a lot of the ball, we're going to have to break teams down, and these are our plans for breaking teams down. I don't feel like we have a plan for breaking teams down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge concern at the moment. Dustin, have you got anything to say before we wrap up, and I'll plug your socials? No worries at all. Thank you, Dustin, for coming on. Where can people follow you on social media?
You can follow me at on Twitter at LUMINOIR. Yep, and that's but I don't talk about football only. I talk about other stuff as well.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. And you can follow me at Harry Scarfe 22. I'm your host as always, as I was tonight. And we have a lot coming up in terms of, if you're listening on YouTube, the YouTube channel, daily video shorts. We've got Premier League podcasts as well, and Spurs podcasts. So 4 podcast episodes a week, really. But in terms of this, the Scarfey Spurs Talk podcast, live on YouTube every Monday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And as tonight proved, we do attract and retain guests from all around the world, and that, when people say that, often it's an overused phrase, but literally we have this case of Dustin coming from Singapore, and we really appreciate him giving up his time. Philip as well, coming from Frankfurt. So I think it's amazing to get the broader fan base perspective from people outside of England as well, and some that don't go to the stadium. It's great. So honestly, really appreciate the continued support. Views haven't been as good, if I'm honest with you, in December, but tonight was a little bit to what we're looking for. So thank you so much for listening live. Really appreciate you getting involved. Like I said, you can still get in touch after. Drop me an email, scarfharry323@gmail.com, if you're interested in coming on the podcast or doing something with me, we'll be collaborating, sending me something in. I'll work with whatever, suits, or you're just enjoying the podcast, you've got any feedback, whatever it may be, I'll be delighted to hear from you. If you have regulars that do drop emails, and it always brings a smile to my face. But thank you so much for listening via audio. Drop us a follow and a 5-star review. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe if you're new. A lot of you watch but don't subscribe, so I hope you can change that, and by subscribing, if you do enjoy, of course, that is the content. But like I said, we really do appreciate your continued support, and I do think that wraps us up very, very nicely. It was a good podcast, like I said, a therapy session at times, as it was predicted to be, but at the same time, it's not good that we've lost, but you get a lot off your chest. But hopefully, whether you're Frank in or Frank out, we can all agree that we want it to work ideally for him, in the long term. So fingers crossed, next time you're hearing from me will be the preview for Liverpool. Like I said, if you're listening on YouTube, that's 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time if you're interested in watching that. But like I said, thank you for your support, your comments. We really do appreciate it. Check out all my guests across social media and do keep coming back. So the views were better and we get to talk Tottenham to more people. So have a great one every morning, evening or afternoon. And a massive come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.